Good evening, everyone. All right, good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. I hope you had a great day. And as always, thank you so much for being here and making space to do this work. You could be anywhere, but you choose to be here. And so I just very much appreciate your commitment to this work. We're going to jump right in. We're at 5:30, so we're going to get started. Tonight, before we get started, I'm looking to see, I don't know if I see any, but just want to very quickly say welcome and thank you to any council members or elected officials that may be in attendance this evening. Just want to say hello to you and thank you for being here. Also to committee members and to guests and community members rather. Thank you for being here and to take part in listening to our steering committee meeting tonight. And so just want to remind all of our attendees that this is a working session for the steering committee. And so with that being said, for our observers, the chat, raise hand, Q&A function, that's limited to our steering committee members who are participating in this working meeting. For those who are in attendance as observers who want to engage and participate in the conversation, just please mark your calendar for March 24th. On March 24th, there's a broader public meeting to engage the community. It's a community workshop. So again, mark your calendar for March 24th. Definitely would love to hear from you. And I know the steering committee would love to hear from you during that time. Tonight, what we're focusing on tonight with the steering committee is we're really looking to continue to refine and get feedback, refine the information and feedback received during the visioning process related to future open space, parks, and recreation on the site. The work tonight will help inform the development of 3 high-level alternatives ahead of the March 9th steering committee meeting. And then just again, there'll be just a reminder that there'll be a broader community meeting on the 24th where other folks can provide feedback and do that kind of stuff. Tonight, we also have some consultants who will be with us. We have Bill Vidic, Ryan, I hope I don't butcher your name, but Soderkis and Kelly Finkowski from DIG Studio tonight. And then we also have Will Wagenlander and David Evans and associates with us tonight as well. And so again, I apologize if I butchered a name there. Tonight, we're gonna do our best to stay on time because we do have 10 individuals from the community who have signed up for comment. And so that's about 20 minutes. And so we'll be, I'll be watching the clock to make sure we save space so we can try to get all 10 of our community members in tonight for their comment. To the steering committee members, again, thank you for being here. You got your email. If there ends up being questions that are not necessarily related to the topic tonight, just remember to shoot me those via email. We'll put those in the parking lot. And I will be sure to get those questions to whoever can answer those best and then get the answer back to the entire steering committee. And then it looks like we just had Councilman Chris Herndon join. So welcome, Councilman. Thank you for being here. With that being said, we're gonna get the meeting going and we're gonna turn it over to, I believe, Owen for our first presentation.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Ross. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Owen Wells. I'm a planner with Denver Parks and Recreation. And I've been following the vision process keenly over the past year and was really very gratifying. Obviously, I'm a parks nut. It was very gratifying to see that the community kind of coalesced around a common vision of a large park and open space as a common vision element for the future of the Park Hill Golf Course. Reinforces the importance of quality parks and open space as part of a complete neighborhood. And you can see right here, this is our department mission statement, where we're focused on creating safe, beautiful, and sustainable places. And that kind of dovetails nicely with the opportunity that we have here at Park Hill. So thanks again for having me. Super excited to join you guys on this part of the process as we try to figure out how this site can help bring a park to Park Hill. So today I'm trying to keep it quick. There's a lot of parks things that I'm happy to talk about all day, but I want to get into the conversation. First, I'll give just a little introduction to our department. Talk a little bit about what I'm hoping to see come out of this phase of the planning work, and give you guys a little parks building 101 or tutorial, so you can have a sense of how things come from the genesis of an idea to actually seeing something on the ground. And then I'll just highlight some of the high level park themes that heard from a bunch of the community voices during the visioning process over the last year. And hopefully that'll kind of be a nice springboard into conversation with Bill and his team at DIG, looking at, kind of drilling down and looking at the opportunities on the particular site here. Go ahead, Courtney. So just to give a little context about us, this is a kind of a snapshot of the fact that we have a very broad and very diverse system. We've got over 6,000 acres of land in our urban parks. We've got another 14,000 in the mountain parks. That's over 250 parks in the urban area. We've got hundreds of athletic fields. We're the stewards of tons of historic resources. We have 2 bison herds. I mean, we have some unusual things here in Denver. And we really have a unique and pretty beautiful system. That being said, we know, just as a fact of the circumstances of history, that this legacy isn't distributed equally. For example, Northeast Park Hill has one of our lowest open space acreage per capita. So when I see an opportunity like Park Hill, it makes me very happy that we have a chance to sort of rectify some of those historic imbalances. We also know our population is growing fast here in Denver as a whole, and our system can't be static. It needs to grow to respond to these pressures and make sure we're able to still provide quality services to all of our constituents. Go ahead. And so as a parks planner, basically I spend most of my time thinking about how we can grow and evolve our network of parks so that we're able to, one, keep pace with that growth, that we can make sure that we have a fair system that's rectified some historic imbalances, that we're building parks that are sustainable and appropriate for our current climate, and the parks that continue to help define Denver. A lot of our neighborhoods, a large park is kind of the core feature of that space and is how people identify. And I want to make sure that as our system grows, we're not doing it in a cookie cutter fashion, but it's a park that reflects the local character, local climate, and local context here. So conveniently, those kind of things that the planning team thinks about are reflected in our game plan for a healthy city. So anytime you talk to a parks person, they should be able to tell you about our strategic plan. So this is a super important document for us. It guides all of our work, whether it's how we operate our parks, how we do recreational programming, how on the planning side we think about our capital investments, and how we just organize ourselves internally. So it's truly our North Star, and it's our guiding document. And it's organized around many recommendations, but they're sort of organized around these 4 pillars of every drop, every person, every dollar, and uniquely Denver. You can kind of understand what recommendations we're talking there. Every drop is how do we make sure that we're building a park system that is sustainable, makes sense in a prairie environment. Every person is really where we've dialed in our equity agenda and making sure that we're delivering resources in a fair manner. Every dollar, we have a big system. It takes a lot to maintain it, and we need to make sure we have financial resources that it's, in addition to being environmentally sustainable, will be financially sustainable, and uniquely Denver, which I mentioned earlier. So just as big picture, that's kind of what drives us every day. And the opportunity we have at Park Hill really, I think, touches a bunch of those 4 pillars. And I think a lot of the themes that came out of some of the conversation that I was able to join in the fall really parallels that. So I think there's some great opportunity here. Okay. So just a little bit more about our systems. I think it'll help, hopefully help spur some creative juices. Part of that great legacy that we have of 250 parks includes a series of regional parks. So this is a couple snapshots of parks that I'm sure hopefully everyone knows, City Park, Wash Park, Sloan's, Cheeseman, some of our high profile regional parks. But you can tell by the architecture of some of the park features and some of the way the landscape was designed. A lot of our regional parks came out of the kind of Victorian and City Beautiful movement turn of the century last year. So the bulk of our regional parks are 100 years old or older. And it's a pretty rare opportunity within a mature city to be able to think about adding a regional park or a park of regional scale, which is a possibility here at Park Hill. So just from a parks professional standpoint, from a Denver resident, it's a really truly once in a generation opportunity. The only other comparable scale park that we're working on right now is in Northwest Denver at Heron Pond. But it's a pretty unusual chance for us collectively, everyone on the steering committee and everyone who's interested in parks, to really think about what is a contemporary regional park in 2020. Alrighty. So this is want to dive in a little bit into what we're asking the steering committee to work on over the next couple of months. When I look back at the vision document, talks about the next steps being a parks planning framework that would be integrated with a small area plan or neighborhood planning effort. And I want to be able to talk a little bit more specifically about what that means here. Typically when we're the Parks Department and we get a piece of property into our portfolio, it's a property. It has a defined boundary. It sits in a context. It's usually in an existing neighborhood. And those kind of parameters define what kind of park this is going to be. And it gives us a starting place. In this case, we still need to establish those basic parameters. And that's sort of the primary purpose of this phase of the work right now. Once we have those parameters established, then we can kind of run into our more traditional parks planning process that some of you folks might be familiar with. And I'll go into those in a little more detail in some of the following slides to give you just a little more expectations along that. But just worth noting that, we're not designing a park today, but what we need to do is establish some of those basic framework so that we can dive into a really detailed parks master plan. Go ahead, Courtney. So again, for our effort today, what's really important from my perspective, and hopefully everyone else, is that trying to talk through what some of those parameters are. And I think it's really size, location, geometric configuration, most importantly, kind of the character of that park. Again, some of those images you saw were, that was a kind of a formal type park from 100 years ago. Is that still the right kind of character? Do we want to have a mix of active space? Do we want to have a mix of naturalized space? How does that look and how does that feel? And how does this park going to relate to other components of the neighborhood, whether it's Colorado Boulevard or the existing Northeast Park Hill neighbors to the east, Park Hill Village to the north, or a new development that is being imagined or requested as part of this visioning process as a complete neighborhood. So that's sort of the homework, I would say, for our next little bit, but I'm happy to go in the next slide, Courtney, into a little bit more context about what happens once we've established those parameters. Typically, how does a park come to be? It's maybe not quite as simple as you might imagine, and it's subject to its own very detailed community engagement process. Hopefully some of you might have been involved in 29th and Fairfax, which was a very small pocket park, but you can kind of get a sense from that, just the level of engagement and iterative design work that happens. And so that same level of effort, but even more detailed, happens as we work on larger sites. So for a site like this, it's large enough that we would need to start with a master plan. And that is typically about a year-long effort where we do a real deep dive with the community on the specific needs of a site. That's where we're talking about the detailed amenities, circulation. We're doing some utility thinking. And eventually all of that work over the course of a year leads us to a nice plan document that talks about principles and vision, but it also ends up with a conceptual plan, sort of the type you see right there in the middle. And most importantly, from parks development, is while we're doing the master plan, we need to think through how we implement it. So how do we finance? How do we phase? How do we ensure that we have financial stewardship to ensure that we can maintain in the long term. So that's a pretty deep effort that what your work here today is going to set us up to do. Go ahead, Courtney. And I'm just putting up a couple images here of some recent master plans that we've done to give you a sense of what these kind of look like. So the one on the right is actually from Heron Pond, and the one on the left is for one we just recently did for Joseph Martinez Park. But you can kind of see that at this level, you're starting to get a pretty good vision for the site, how circulation works, what types of specific amenities we're looking for, materiality, landscape types, that kind of detail. So that's where we'll go in the next step. But it doesn't end there. So that illustrative gives us a good place to work from. But we need to take that kind of colored document that you saw on the previous page and get it down to a fully engineered construction documents, which look kind of like the image on the bottom left, that we can get out to bid and get contractors on board to actually construct. So again, this is super genericized. It's not particular to this site exactly, but just to give you a sense that it can take up to 3 years from the time we kind of have the kernel of an idea and funding to deliver it to actually get through that deep community engagement, get to construction documents, and actually see something realized on the ground. Okay. Alrighty. So that's, again, super fast park building process, and I'll be happy to talk afterwards or during the rest of the meeting if folks have questions about those particular stages or how the work that we're doing at the park planning framework relates. But I want to make sure I keep moving myself along here. So this next little section, I want to just give you some food for thought as you start thinking about, okay, what should a park look like at Park Hill? This image is something that we use just internally to help us manage our system. It shows the whole variety of different types of parks that we have, ranging from mountain parks out west to regional parks, athletic complexes, linear parks, community parks, neighborhood parks, pocket parks. And they all have some different characteristics and different functions, but I think some of them might be useful as you think about examples that you know from your life and that are interesting and that you might want to reference here. Go ahead, Gordon. And I would also just caution that this is not a prescriptive list. Again, it's kind of a more descriptive. It just helps us organize our own thinking. But on the right, you can see our 10 regional parks. If you're looking for examples of other parks of about the size that we're envisioning here. And they can serve a whole bunch of different functions. You can see some of the representative features and amenities in that second column. But the important thing to note about our regional parks is that they're able to marry a whole bunch of different types of activities and functions, and they might have varying character, depending where you are in that space. Go ahead, Courtney. And then our next 2 layers of parks that are usually community focused are our community park and our neighborhood park. Community parks, there's some more examples on the right. They are a little more varied in their size, a little bit smaller than our regional parks typically, but they are a place of gathering. Usually there's a couple neighborhoods that are, might be coming together at these areas. And we're able to, again, do a whole lot of different types of functions. We're able to accommodate quite a bit of different functionality in those types of parks. And then the last park is a neighborhood park where we're trying to develop a character and a function that's usually for people that live close by and can walk by and have sort of their day-to-day recreation activities and places of respite. All right. We've had a whole bunch of information that's come through over the past year from the visioning process so far. And there's been some pretty interesting discussion and some fascinating things that came out of it from me as a parks person. I think what is really interesting is just sort of the variety of activities that people are interested in doing at this location. We have, from the community survey, we saw a big priority on athletic fields, and that jibes with our experience as the park system managers. We have quite a lot of demand for sports. It's tough for us to get that kind of facility in every park. At the same time, we had a lot of interest in some of the more traditional regional park amenities like picnic areas and pavilion shelters, opportunities for play, and just general open spaces. We also had some interesting input from the community navigator reports and some of the conversations that this group had, I want to say it was in October or November, about just what they're imagining from a parks vision. And I think one of the big themes was the importance of community gathering places on the site. So I'd love to talk a little bit more, or hopefully people can talk a little bit more about what kind of gathering places they are imagining. And a bunch of the natural resources and environmental sustainability features, whether it's expanding our tree canopies to combat urban heat island effect, or other garden activities or fresh food opportunities. So very interesting. And I think again, the great opportunity here is that there is the kind of scale to accommodate a lot of these uses. And I want to make sure that as this park framework gets developed, we're ensuring that we create a space that, again, the details will come later, but we want to make sure we're reserving a space that can accommodate this whole spectrum of needs. And I would just add, again, food for thought, just from a department perspective, there's a couple other interesting things and system-wide needs that we think about quite a lot. One is that we have an ongoing in-progress outdoor adventure master plan that's really been focused on some of our historically underserved neighborhoods and ensuring that everyone in Denver has an opportunity to experience the kind of quintessential Colorado outdoor nature-based activities. And as we've been looking at our system, again, just by the way of history, a lot of those features that we have, like the Ruby Hill Bike Park, which is an amazing feature, are on the west side of town. It's also where most of our lakes are. So some of those kind of opportunities are clustered there. And we want to make sure that we're providing equal opportunity for some of these outdoor adventure activities on the east side of town as well. We also have some things that our system just doesn't have that our peer cities have and some of our surrounding communities have. Again, kind of relating to that field demand, we don't have really any indoor year-round facilities like turf fields. So we're always interested in trying to think of ways that we can kind of provide expanded recreational opportunities that we just don't have in the system at all. So happy to talk about those more later as you guys start chewing over what this kind of space might look like and might mean in Park Hill. So I'll just, hopefully I kept it under my 15, and just gonna let Bill and his team bring up their presentation, but again, they're gonna give you a little more site-specific detail. Some of the material, hopefully you will remember from the environmental and park and open space technical memo that got prepared in the spring of last year, but they'll be able to dive a little deeper into the site itself and hopefully spur some additional discussion about those big picture questions that I was asking, sort of how should this park be shaped? What kind of character should it have? And what might be the array of amenities that we want to make sure we're leaving space for. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Owen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Vitek. I'm a principal with Dig Studio. Dig Studio is a landscape architecture and planning firm based here in Denver. We are part of the overall David Evans team, consulting team working on this project for the city. We've been fortunate enough to work on several of the key park projects within the city, including Central Park, the Pacquo Sanchez Park, and we're currently working on the detailed design of Heron Pond Park, also known as Carpio Sanguinetti Park in the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhood. So hopefully you'll all be able to have enjoyed some of those, and we'll get to enjoy Heron Pond soon. With me tonight as well from our team, our Dig Studio team, are Gretchen Wilson, Ryan Saterkis, and Kelly Finkowski, all are key members of our firm's park team. As we're getting into the area plan process, we have been leading with this phrase that you see here, a parks first approach, because we believe that the park that will end up on this property can become that organizing element and identifying feature for the surrounding neighborhoods. This is very much in keeping with what we believe is a Denver tradition, a strong, longstanding Denver planning tradition of where residents identify where they live by the park they're closest to. So many times when you ask someone where they live, they'll say, well, I live at Wash Park, or I live at Central Park, or I live at City Park. So we just see the same opportunity for this project site for this park to become that organizing element, and thus this park's first approach. As Owen mentioned, we're not here tonight to do a detailed design or even a master plan for the park. Rather, we're here tonight to solicit your feedback on what elements and character feel you would like to see in a park on this piece of property. We have some images and some precedent examples of other parks of similar size and scale that we'll share with you. We have a few exercises that we'll be going through with you to hopefully engage and solicit, again, feedback, but to stimulate a productive conversation on what's most important to you and what you would like to see and not want to see, for that matter, in a future design of a new park on this site. Again, your feedback is critical. It's part of the overall community planning process and helping to shape what will lead to a series of 3 alternative plans. And as we get rolling here tonight, we're primarily going to focus on parks. So as we do that, I would just like you to think about some of your favorite memories in a park growing up as a kid, or some more recent experiences that you've had in a park that brought you moments of joy and pleasure. Just whatever those kind of memories come to, please drop those in the chat. And those don't all have to be here in Denver, but we'll be going over those in a little bit as we dive into a little bit further discussion on our overall dialogue about the park potential. So tonight, put on your parks planners hats, and the park will be the key driver of what will shape the overall vision for the property. Next, what's really emerged through the visioning and kind of planning exercises to date is this kind of list of prevailing vision summary points. And at the top of the list, you can see create a new large gathering, new large park and community gathering place. So that's obviously the big driver. Third, you can see preserve and expand. I don't think these are rated in any particular order, but I think park certainly is at the top. Preserve and expand the tree canopy to combat urban heat island effects in this area. And then another key component that relates to parks and recreation here at the top of our list is the list that was compiled from all of your input is to add youth and recreational sports opportunities. So these become kind of the key principles from this list that we really want to focus on tonight as we talk about parks and a parks first approach. These other elements we'll be certainly diving into and dealing with as we begin to frame up the alternatives for the site, but we felt that tonight we really, again, wanted to lead with parks and focus on the key attributes and elements that could be a part of this park as we move forward, as that will be a key driver. So let's take a moment next here, Kelly. So let's take a moment to review some of the context and surrounding park elements to the property. Just to orient everyone, this is the Park Hill site right in the middle, obviously Colorado Boulevard to the west, the A-line and Smith Road corridor to the north. We have the, excuse me, we have the existing residential and commercial up to the northwest corner of the site between Colorado and the park or the parcel site boundary. And then we have 35th Avenue to the south, and then kind of surrounded by the traditional Denver grid fabric of residential, kind of around to the west, to the south, and to the east and southeast. We're also identifying on this diagram, you see the green squares are the kind of the existing close by park spaces, more at a regional level, and then some of the key connection opportunities, the dashed green lines. You can see there could be opportunities to connect some of those parks Certainly, we think there's an opportunity, hopefully, to think about this on a broader scale about how we connect to the new improvements on the 39th Avenue Greenway project. And then also the orange dash line is we're well aware of the 303 Artway project that is proposed, and think that, again, the planning and thinking about this site can maybe find a way to actually integrate that 303 Artway into the site itself. Let's go to the next slide, please. This slide deals with the program or elements that are in the existing parks that surround the site. So these little icons are in the table legend down here. So they represent those park features that are available in those park locations. The pink dash lines that you see around the property itself are the half-mile and the 1 mile kind of distance from the site itself. And that is kind of the planning area, overall broader context boundary of the planning area that we're looking at. So again, adjacent parks, their programs, and then the other thing on this image that is portrayed is the kind of the light green film identifies kind of a walk from an existing park to the site. It's kind of identifying a 10-minute walk shed, which is kind of a typical planning tool that's used in terms of proximity. So you can see that however this site ends up developing, that there's the edges to the west and to the south and are really, begin to be at the outside edges of that 10-minute walk. So hence the need, as we all know, for more park space within the site itself. And in addition, as Owen was referring to earlier, there's the city's overall studies and game plan clearly identified this site or this location, this general neighborhood location, as a high priority zone for new parkland. The surrounding parks constitute approximately about 45 acres of existing parkland, but the per capita acreage per 1,000 people for the neighborhoods in this area is well underserved by both Denver standards and national standards. So again, a large key park will be critical to help providing those types of park amenities to the to this underserved community and neighborhood areas. Okay, next, please. So in part of our early, what we refer to as our technical analysis work, we did some studies that showed, that looked at the existing trees on the site, from the old golf course. We ranked them. We were fortunate enough to get Mike Swanson, the head of Denver Forestry, to join us in a pretty long site walk on a beautiful day where we kind of walked the property from one edge to the other. And with Mike's input and knowledge, we're able to identify where we felt the most viable high value trees were for the potential to look for saving. Maybe even some of them are small enough for transplant, but that would come out in a much more detailed studies down the road. But it certainly identified the larger context areas of trees and where they were viable, that were still in good health. Our orange was what we refer to as medium value trees, and red was dead or dying trees. Again, this was done over just about a year ago, so there's maybe even some further changes. One of those changes that has begun is the current property owner, Westside, has begun to plant some new nursery stock trees in this southeast corner of the site, identified approximately where this magenta kind of oval is identified on the property. So I think there's clearly some trees that could be looked at saving for help reduce urban heat island impacts, provide impact and stature and character to the site right away, whether it's in a park or in a parkway or a community park. We think that there's clearly some value in those, in many of those existing trees, and to kind of develop a plan that they could potentially respond and work around those. The other, I think, key technical analysis drawing that we looked at was the drainage flow. And, we looked at the topography, the drainage patterns, and obviously everything is kind of moving from southwest, if you will, up to the northeast into the new drainage improvements basin, which is part of the Park Hill to Platte improvements. And so there's this, general flow. There's a couple little, quirks or turns, low spots in here, but the general overall flow is to the northeast. And again, we think that working with the natural topography, especially if we're talking about potentially saving trees, we have to preserve that existing topography around trees. And so this was some kind of important information to us when we start thinking about how a park might take its shape, where it might go, and in relationship to both drainage, topography, and vegetation. Next. So to help get our minds into kind of the scale of the piece of property that we're dealing with, we're going to do what we call some scale comparisons. On the right is an aerial image of the site at the same scale as what we're referring to as a precedent example on the left-hand side. And so again, the white line that you're seeing here on the Park Hill site is that is about 130 acres. Just in the northeast corner, the drainage improvements themselves that were recently completed, that's about 25 acres. So overall about 155 acres, but in terms of truly what could be looked at relative to this planning process is the 130 acres kind of identified by this white dashed line. So a scale comparison to this in terms of the classifications and criteria that Owen was talking about in terms of Denver parks is Central Park. So you can see that's Central Park is about 83 acres, and you can get a sense of if you've been there, if you've been on the sledding hill, you've been in the natural areas, you've been on the fields, on the splash pad area, et cetera. You get hopefully you get a sense of how vast that park is. So it's actually smaller than the overall site here, but it's pretty equally divided between a very strong natural area on the north half of the site and a recreational and more structured amenities on the south side. And this long axial promenade, just give you a sense of scale, it's about 1.3 miles in terms of its length from one end to the other. So maybe that helps. If you've ever walked it, you know you've got some good exercise. So our next comparison is also out at Central Park, is the Westerly Creek drainage way and park improvements along that. So primarily areas that used to be runways, and all this drainage was in pipes underground was brought to the surface and really turned into amenity and served as water quality, detention, and as well as help provide a really connected system of trails and seeding nodes, natural habitat, and also tree restoration all along the drainage corridor itself. So again, about about a quarter of the site, a third of the site, again, of what we're dealing with here in terms of that area of Westerly Creek. Next is Pacquo Sanchez Park on the near west side, just to the west of Federal and south of Colfax. Hopefully, again, many of you have had a chance to go there, take your kids there, take your grandkids there. I think it's become a really iconic and popular park for the city of Denver's park network. It's a like a park that is very respectful of the cultural heritage of the near West Side, in particular, the gentleman that was named after, Pacquo Sanchez, who was Denver's first Hispanic DJ and a very important figure in the community and political leader. And so everything that was kind of developed in the park, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but kind of worked around respect for his to DJ and music and sound, and use that as a design element. But again, you know, a little bit like, you know, 20% of the overall site here, but you know, the main new area is this area just north of Lakewood Gulch, but the area to the south also is open park and recreation and trail land down there as well. But again, so you can see the size comparison between the two. And then, so, you know, Pacquo Sanchez and effectively would scale wise in its entirety would kind of fit up in that northeast corner where the drainage improvements are currently located. Okay, next. These are just some images now of those parks. So coming down from an aerial plan view. So looking at Central Park, here's that very long mile-plus promenade that I was referring to. It really was an organizing element to split half the park into a much more natural native habitat, restoration of native grasses, also provided an area to do some shaping of the topography to create sledding hills and landforms in areas that kind of reflective and mimic the old sand dunes, which were really a part of the original Sand Creek ecosystem, which was close by here. But it has this long walkway. Along that walkway are organized features such as the little mini boating lake for model boats and floating toys, big picnic shelter, parking areas. And then to the center of the photo, there's a whole series of fields that are striped in a variety of configurations for soccer, football, junior play, junior peewee football, junior soccer, lacrosse, and then there's also other areas that are set up and used for community club events like volleyball clubs, kickball clubs that come out during the evenings in the warm months and have their activities out there as well. So and then further down, which is a little bit at the end of the photo, there's some another picnic shelter that is for rent, another or I should say a splash fountain, interactive fountain, and the what we refer to as the Dr. Seuss Playland, kind of a large themed playground feature. So again, 83 acres, lots of open space and lots of activities though that could went into this space. And then all connected to the residential fabric around it, which has since been built up. Next, we have a photo of Twin Silos Park up in Fort Collins, a little bit smaller, about a little bit over 50 acres. Not as much in terms of the extensiveness of athletic fields, but some more, I'll say, structured, organized fields like a half ball diamond complex. For example, this is something that Stapleton Central Park did not have, is that ball diamond configuration. So this was meant for rec leagues or and youth athletic leagues, et cetera. So that's just what we refer to as a two complex with two fields off of a centered walkway. It does have some informal lawn areas around that, again, where the fields can be striped for football, soccer, lacrosse, et cetera, both in a junior and regulation facilities. And then the old silos were used as a feature to be for a large picnic area and splash pad area associated with that. And then other in the foreground here, more restroom and picnic facilities, outdoor barbecue areas. And then this also has a pretty extensive parkour exercise trail that goes throughout the park as well. Our next example is the Lowry Sports Complex Park. Again, this I think was focused again overall. The park is bigger than is kind of overall around 80 acres, but the athletic area itself is a little bit smaller. Again, you can see the size for 2 soccer fields or multi-purpose fields, restroom facilities, and then native areas that surround it that were used to kind of pick up grade, and then further lawn areas that athletic areas that could be used, again, striped for different events and different practices, etc. So keep thinking about how much of the area within the park that we're looking at Park Hill, relative to natural, to manicured and structured recreation, to passive recreation. We'll want to dive into that more as we get into our dialogue here. And then think also about things like, this park shows lighting. I'm not saying, we'll have lighting at this park or won't have lighting, but it's those kinds of things, that kind of dialogue, that kind of feedback that we're looking to gain from you in terms of all these kinds of elements that you're seeing here in these precedent photos as we go through them. Okay. Next, this is Philip Miller Park down in Castle Rock. Overall, again, the size is a lot of native area around it, so 300 acres, but again, the structured park area is about 50 acres. Large center green that's used for functions, as well as synthetic turf for an athletic field and pitch for soccer, football, multi-sports, picnic shelters. This park, if you've been down there, has just about everything and anything I think you can think of in a park design these days. There's this right in the foreground here in the center is the hill climb, which is a set of steps that come right up, probably, I don't know, a half mile straight up the side of the hill. And it's hugely popular with people running the steps. It has zip lines, it has overlook towers, it has an indoor recreation pool, an outdoor pool, splash pad, just a ton of again, recreational amenities that were put in here. Outdoor amphitheater, performance venue back in this area. So again, we're going to want to know what you like and don't like here in these examples. And then next, I think, is our last example, one of the last two, is a park we did down in outside of Phoenix in Gilbert. Obviously a much different landscape aesthetic, but one that it really prioritizes where you use lawn and don't use lawn. Here you get desert, otherwise in Colorado we'll get native grasses. But again, I think this is really meant to illustrate that within this small area right here, which is only about 20 acres in size, we've been able to build into the hillside an adventure playground, activity, climbing slides, climbing rocks, all ADA accessible. We have a big center picnic area and picnic pavilion, restroom complex. And then off to the left, we have a very large splash pad and water feature to keep you cool in the heat down there. And then all this is ringed by a series of picnic pavilions. So this has kind of become the new, I'll say, the iconic park or element for the whole city of Gilbert. And again, kind of a sense of civic pride, this identity, this marker, which again, we think is so important and has so much potential for, as Owen said earlier, putting the park back in Park Hill as we move forward. And then next, I think our last comparison example is Ruby Hill Park here in Denver, just to the other west side of Santa Fe. Some very interesting elements in terms of a mountain bike track, sometimes called a pump track, but it's a pretty extensive network of features that are all geared towards all ages, kids to adults within this bike park feature. Obviously, Ruby Hill has the big amphitheater and area for events, as well as the ski and snowboard hill and sledding hill. So, again, similar size, or could be a very similar size to the area that we're talking about on Park Hill. But again, a good combination and I'll say a more, not a but maybe unique combination of elements within the park itself. So, okay, with that, and I don't know if we've been getting any comments into the chat yet or not, but we'd really enjoy if you all could kind of think about this question as well as the earlier one about what are some of your favorite memories of a park, either growing up or recent experience at a park. But what are the elements and what would you like to see in a new park on the Park Hill property? With some of the parks that we went through. Just think about that, drop that in the chat if you could, please, and let us know some of the things, some of those fond memories, or some of the things that you would really think is important and critical in this new park development.
Cool, Bill. Why don't we take about 3 to 5 minutes,
Sure,
and let folks make those comments in the chat, so they have some time to
that'd be
really
great.
think about it. So we'll take
Great.
5 guys for you to populate the chat, and then we'll come back in just a second. All right, we're going to take just about another minute or so as it looks like the chat is starting to slow down. Great, lots of really cool ideas in there. If you still have something, go ahead and still add it to the chat. But Bill, going to turn it back over,
Sure.
over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ross. And Courtney and other team, Owen, if you want to jump in here too on some of these broader questions, but I think thank you all first for your comments here. I would say that there's a good list of comments regarding potential integration to the drainage area to the northeast. And I think that's a good point about the fact that I think open space can really serve multiple functions today. I don't think that we can put structured fields down in there, but I think in terms of connectivity and trails and what will really become a natural area, that will provide an amenity in addition to this I think bigger park that we're talking to as well. But how that's connected and connectivity to it is certainly a theme in some of the comments that I'm seeing. I'm also seeing,
Bill,
yeah.
Could we let Owen maybe answer
Sure.
that as well? I know they've had
Yeah.
some thoughts from DPR on the
Absolutely.
retention area.
Yeah, for sure. I know that question came up in the fall too. And it's certainly possible for detention and recreation facilities to coexist, when they're designed that way thoughtfully. I would just note for our purposes here today, like I'm really interested in making sure that's, a logical connected part of a park system. But there are some limitations that is a part of a broader engineered flood control system. And there's some features of that would be tough to do some kinds of park features, as Bill was mentioning. I think long-term, we should definitely think about how that can be folded into a comprehensive open space network here on the site in ways that we can kind of work to make that feel better and look better. But for purposes of kind of the park conversation today, I'd really like to kind of focus on the upland area. We'll definitely could layer on interesting things up there over time. But from a parks management and willingness to sort of take land and maintain it, we would really be wanting to utilize the kind of the upland space that we have, and we have the opportunity here. So I kind of want to focus the conversation here on that piece of it, just because I know like the numbers question gets confusing. I think it's easier for now for us just to kind of focus on the piece of the property that Bill has kind of outlined in the white, just so that we aren't confusing ourselves about, what scale are we talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Owen, do you want to address the overall game plan comment here as well?
Yes, if I can find it.
It's right at the top, close to the top. Yeah, relative to park acreage and kind of this being a high priority, which we've both mentioned in terms of,
Yeah, for sure.
identified.
Yes. So we have actually we are a department that looks strategically and opportunistically for ways to expand our park network throughout the city. As I mentioned before, obviously Denver is whiplash fast growth, comes with it associated recreation demands, and we're trying to make sure that we're keeping ahead of that. And game plan does note that we have some goals that are pretty aggressive, and just citywide, making sure that we have enough acreage to satisfy all of our open space needs for our constituents. Same time, we have some very specific neighborhoods that are well under the average. North Park Hill and some of the Clayton and Skyline all are. Northeast Park Hill, that statistical area probably being the most underserved. So yeah, the ability to deliver a large scale park here can kind of dramatically change that equation for this neighborhood.
It's a good comment here about orienting to mountain views. Also, I think a kind of a consistent theme of need for recreational components, but also balance with natural areas as well. Comment about providing opportunities for winter activities. Absolutely. I think, Ruby Hill, Central Park are places that really begin to address that. And maybe there's new ways of even thinking about expanding that here. David or Courtney, anything else you want to respond to?
Bill, I was wondering maybe if Jermaine could expand on his comment about recreation center for the youth. I know there is a recreation center not too far from here, but maybe, and I think you have some images coming up later, but of some of the amenities of the idea of maybe a field house or more of a facility that can be used all year round.
Yes, and on top of that, I think right now where you guys plan on doing all this, there's a neighborhood there and there's a lot of youth there. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe that we could coincide and have pretty much everything in that area that everybody wants. But at the same time, let's look at the youth and the elderly, okay? The elderly is not going to be walking paths in the winter, but at the same time, they could be at the field house or a bigger gym, maybe walking a track or having some type of swim classes there for them. Some of these rec centers that are in the neighborhood aren't catering to everyone and everyone's needs just because of city funding. There's not anybody to work those areas or whatnot. So if we have this space that could create jobs and opportunity for all and help. I mean, that's a lot of area, and you're talking about a lot of trees. That's a lot of oxygen, okay? But at the same time, if those people don't have certain things around them, water, fresh gardens, that's another thing. A neighborhood with a garden, that's a nice area to set up a garden for the neighborhood. So it's a lot of things that we could do with this area. I think that there has to be somebody on your side of the fence that could see the vision just like we see it. I'm a resident for many years, and there's been a lot of promises. We're not getting them. Somebody needs to really listen to the neighborhood and input that into your plan. Don't close the doors before it starts the building process. Keep that open door to the streets, because one thing I do know is that you're going to have a lot of people that's going to be upset with you. Let's come together on this. It's real simple. If kids could do it, why can't we?
Cool.
I'm done.
Thanks, Jermaine. That's great.
I think the key word is balance. If we have the correct balance that really serves the community, we're going to be fine. And part of that balance is having generational wealth, you know, and that goes to the building of attainable, affordable housing. So I think balance is the key.
Thank you. All right. All right, back on you, Bill.
Okay, thank you. All very good comments and all a part of this process that we are really truly committed to with the city to try to work together to have just what you're saying, a open door and a balanced approach to looking at this property. So next part of our dialogue with you tonight is in just again trying to help you kind of gone through some precedent examples, some scale comparisons, is really think about the site specifically. And again, so for our next slide, these are not meant to be saying that everything that you see here would end up in a new park at Park Hill, but I think there's certainly the opportunity for many of these to be located there. And again, this is all part of the detailed process that Owen laid out earlier that the city would go through in developing a detailed master plan for this. But again, just to get you thinking, and hopefully at the end here, what we're looking for is some just some feedback on prioritization of elements. So, everything from that first image we just had there, from basketball courts and a bike park to splash pad and swimming pools to gathering spaces, picnic pavilions, adventure play. You know, places that not just traditional play equipment itself, but rocks and logs and things that can really, where kids can really interact with nature on. Athletic fields, a sports court complex would be at pickleball, tennis courts, basketball courts, outdoor amphitheaters. This is one at Central Park and one of their neighborhood parks for that's used from everything from farmers markets to concerts to community events. Again, athletic fields. This is we refer to as the Mike Tower at Pacquo Sanchez Park down here in the playground. A little bit more what we would call active play or multi-generational play. So encouraging kids to play with parents and kids of all ages to be able to play and interact with a feature like this. Other thoughts on program elements include, next Kelly, everything from archery, areas for archery practice to someone just mentioned community gardens, again, picnic areas, basketball, roller hockey, you know, multi-purpose kind of synthetic surface could be used for anything from basketball to rollerblade hockey, those types of multi-purpose kind of features. And then also, again, you know, with the potential for this, there could be some things that aren't as common in all parks, but everything from like a disc golf course, a frisbee golf course, to batting cages, to potentially a dog park, to what we're referring to as limited golf facilities. And by that, we mean it could be a driving range. I mean, I know we're very close to City Park Golf Course, and they just went through a tremendous redo of that facility. But it could, we could look at things like a driving range, the First Tee program, which is youth golf program in Denver. Denver is one of the centers of the First Tee program throughout the country. The program at City Park, having worked on that, I know is packed. And there could be an opportunity for a small area of this site to be a secondary or supporting First Tee program area, which is a smaller course and or chipping and kind of putting facilities. And then even more structured elements. Someone mentioned field house. I think the idea of facilities that can be used year round in rain and snow and inclement weather, but those kind of indoor facilities that again could be open for the public as well as other team and youth athletic league support programs, etc. So if you have particular thoughts on items that you see here or seen in these kind of precedent photos that you like, again, please continue to drop those in the chat as people are doing. We're seeing some good comments there. And then where we want, yeah.
Would you mind just running back through those pictures
Sure.
so everybody can see them
Absolutely.
one more time?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr. Ross?
Yes.
I'd love to hear some of the senior committee members' thoughts on some of these visuals here, on what's standing out to them, on things that have them excited or things that they don't like.
Great. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. If you wanted folks to do this in the chat, or if you wanted folks to,
I'd love to hear
sure.
some
hear
conversation.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and if you've got comments, folks, go ahead and unmute.
I'll go. I think that using the whole 155 acres for a park is not really dealing with the neighborhood. I mean, you guys are sidestepping one of the main factors of that neighborhood, and that is a desert, a food desert. Okay, we could grow fruits and vegetables, but What are we going to do for our cleaning supplies? What are we going to do for the pharmacies that people can make it to Walgreens up the block or the King Supers that's a couple of miles away? You know, there's other things that is needed in that neighborhood and has been needed in that neighborhood for many years. And still, it seems like we're sidestepping it. And once again, I feel like everything could come together in this one area. If we come together, it's not that hard. I feel like there's too many people that's trying to pull their narrative to another direction when we could just come together 50-50. It's real simple. If kids could work out a coloring book, why can't we work this out? You guys have a good evening.
All right, other comments pertaining to just the, and I think Courtney and David jump in here, but just because Jermaine said something, you're not talking about the whole 155 acres being parked. You're just talking about a portion of the park, and we're just discussing what that portion of the park could look like with these kinds of things, correct?
That is correct. Absolutely. You know, we're having Bill here lead this conversation because we think a parks first approach is the right way to discuss how you lay out the site. But as the prevailing vision document laid out last year, you know, that there is a mix of uses, but we do think the park is the focus point, and that's where we wanted to start tonight. And then as we go through this process month to month, we're going to be adding in some of those other conversation elements, so we have a full vision for the site.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And so other thoughts on what you've seen, what you like, didn't like, in things of interest, or general comments on some of these pictures or images you've seen?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ross. I'll just, Pete Marzek, quickly jumping in here. You know, I think the name of the neighborhood is Park Hill, right? And so I think that whatever we end up with here, having that park integrated completely into the neighborhood and making, you know, building the neighborhood around the park, the Sanchez Park had these like fingers that reached into the neighborhood that I thought were so cool. The way they it was almost like this mini parkway. And the way that it communicates with the neighborhood, I think, could be really exciting and soften that whole edge and make it feel just amazing. And again, you know, we can all get what we want here. I think that's probably true.
Well, thanks, Pete. Shandy, were you about to say something, or you just came on camera?
Yeah, I can. I like a lot of the images that I'm seeing here, and the diversity of images, because I think that the size and scale that this land could provide for a park really could lend itself to all of the activities that people have mentioned, of both very structured recreation that are like the sports amenities that people have mentioned, but also the more passive recreation or trails, like the image here that's the nature areas. I think, you know, bringing some of that back into this part of the community could be really complementary of what is in other parks nearby. And so I'd really like to see more of that, you know, really focus on how this can really complement and provide new opportunities. And I just want to also point out the image of gathering spaces you have where it's large group picnic areas, I think will be really great for the community to come and gather, not just for events, but, you know, if large families want to gather and things like that, not just really spreading them out. Although I think having some small areas is always welcome for people to spread out, but with the community really wanting a space to come together, that image speaks to me.
Thank you. Sean, you came on camera. Sean?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things. I heard the comment about focusing on the upland area, but I think it's important. We've got 25 acres in that detention area, and I'd hate to have that disconnected from what's upland. And also right now it's pretty weedy. There's not a lot of programming there. So I understand we want to focus on what's above, but I I don't want that to be ignored. It's 25 acres. That's a huge opportunity, even though it fills with water. And then my other comment is I saw in the chat a lot about, quiet spaces, what parks are for. And I think Colorado, when you're walking along there, you can barely hear yourself think. So, whether that goes into other programming, and maybe that's a conversation for another day, but I think getting away from Colorado is important. If you look at like City Park, it's got the museum and science center on one side, and it's got a pretty good buffer on the university side as well, to where the quiet spaces are inside. So that's it.
Thanks, Sean. Mrs. Grimes?
For me, most going just to the use of the space for the park. I liked most of the images, the ones that come to the top. I like the gathering place, and I like the athletic fields in total, and the splash pads, and the amphitheater. But I think, even the playground grabs me. So most of these, I really think, youth oriented and family oriented, spaced out, have a lot of potential.
Thank you.
I'll jump in and just add, I think one of the images that was shown was focused on golf. And I know we've talked a lot about the history of this space, obviously being a golf course. I think it would be amazing to utilize the net. I'm the representative from the Overlook at Park Hill. There's an existing net, a former driving range. I think it would be great to be able to allow for practice space, golf facilities. I know that was a really coveted area where natural grass driving ranges don't exist in the city necessarily. So I would love to see that maintained as well.
Great, thank you. Okay. Any other comments before we keep going?
Yeah, I'd like to know more about the field house vision. Can you give us some more information on the field house?
Yeah, we don't have a specific idea for it yet. It was just kind of, as I alluded to, it's something we don't have in our system, and we have a need to be able to provide youth and adult sports in a year-round and controlled environment. And so it's something that's always on our mind, and just floating that idea out there. Could be a variety of things, including a gathering space too. I thought one of the really amazing themes that's come out of some of the chat here, and also some of the earlier conversations, is just the fact that the desire to make this a real place of joining and gathering. And that can mean a bunch of different things. And so we might have, this park might be able to support different ways of gathering, right? Whether it's a big pavilion shelter, or whether it's an indoor field house where you can have a multi-generational event where, grandparents can be hanging out, having a party, and the kids are playing. There's could be a variety of ways to do it, and kind of replicating a little bit of the awesome anecdotes that people had about the clubhouse, serving a little bit as that function. So it's an inspiration image. It's not a defined thing. So just wanted to help have this group help us kind of understand that and flesh that out.
Pastor Phillips?
Yes, I just wanted to just affirm that I really think this was a smart way for us to dig into the conversation about the development, to put the focus on the park, and to really demonstrate how realistic it is to be open to the options that are available to us, to not just be narrowly focused. These examples that have been presented that are already existing use of space in other places across our Colorado community, I think really demonstrate how we have such a great opportunity to not only provide residential space for this community, but to make the feature of this space Park Hill. And I love that whole expression of really bringing this the current name of the acreage alive with reestablishing full-fledged park in that space. So I just wanted to affirm, I really think it was a smart way for us to begin our focus on this.
Great.
All right.
Well, thank you all
Back
for all
to
the, thank you, Dr. Ross, and thank you for all those comments that from folks have spoken up here, and all many more that are coming in the chat as well. So thank you all. Very good, very insightful, and yeah, just what we were hoping to kind of work with you all tonight on is just to get your thoughts and your likes and dislikes out on an open dialogue here. So our next exercise is looking at the site itself. Now that we've looked at other precedent parks, scales comparisons, program elements, is now we want to actually kind of drill down into the site itself, and not in a detailed design way, but at a higher level to kind of show or demonstrate how these program elements could potentially be organized in a way in different concepts and different fashions. So our next image. Okay, so we're not saying that the park is an oval. We're not saying it's located just specifically in this part of the site. It's not to one side or the other. But what we are saying is that conceptually, there's a couple ways of thinking about the park in terms of how it might be organized. One is more of just a traditional Denver park, which is kind of responding to the city grid or a strong form in and of itself, that is kind of inboard of major roads, and is that park in which other uses rotate or function around it. And again, just to clarify some of the comments that were made just a couple of minutes ago too, is by no means are we saying that in these diagrams that it's wall-to-wall park, that it's certainly looking at areas, residual areas that could provide some of the other vision goals that people were mentioning, like addressing the need for grocery store and challenges of the food desert we have there, and other opportunities for affordable housing and those kinds of elements. So, but this is just back to leading with the park and a parks first approach. This is just one idea. It just could be one, analogous to Wash Park, to City Park, parks that are in the center and surrounded by uses on the outside edges. The orange dash line that you see there is an indication of what we talked about earlier of, we see great potential, and however this evolves, that the 303 Artway as a trail, as a connection to the local communities, as kind of an iconic element and special feature that responds to the history and the culture of the neighborhoods, could be integrated as a main element within the park space itself. So this is one idea. Second is the notion of kind of what we refer to just as linked pearls, but kind of responding to where existing trees and landforms exist, that it could be, nodes with connectors, another node with a connector, and then, as someone was pointing out earlier, even the potential then, or I think that we look strongly at the potential of connecting, obviously, to the drainage in the northeast corner, just in terms of connectivity and trails. So another way of thinking about, where park space could go, and then where other opportunities for other land uses could be potentially placed. And then the third way of thinking conceptually about this, again, this was, looking at integrating the 303 Art Walk, but responding more to, again, the drainage pattern and the vegetative pattern of the site, in terms of where the park itself might go, or could potentially be laid out. So again, none of these are meant to be a proposed solution yet. As we get into more detailed planning and integrate land uses, mobility, transportation, employment centers, and those types of elements, which are all part of the vision goals. Those will begin to knit together the fabric, if you will, of the overall site. But I think what we're clearly trying to show is that the predominant element, though, of the site, and what we've heard, is the need for a very large park. And whether it's all connected in one big swoop, whether it's buffered around all the edges, whether it's broken down into a series of interconnected parks, that's what we'll be working with as we develop those plans moving forward. So we could pause here and see if there's any comments on this. These kind of just conceptual ways of thinking or approaches.
Yep. So we definitely want to open it up for any thoughts or comments. We've got about 10 minutes in order to ensure that we allow time for the community to talk to the steering committee.
Yeah.
Let's get to the actual exercise.
Let's do the
Bill, where
actual.
you
Okay.
actually,
We'll go to the
I think
next.
that will
Yeah.
stoke a lot more conversation.
Yeah,
I want to make
okay.
sure they get to see
Sure.
how this
Look,
is
if you have,
done.
if you have
No,
thoughts
thanks.
on those, if you have thoughts on these diagrams, please put those in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then let's keep going, Bill.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dr. Ross. Yeah. And so now, again, with the scale and the program elements, our next slide is really kind of an exercise. This is where I'd really like to hear from you. So again, think of the whole site as a blank slate. Again, it's not wall-to-wall park, although it's a pretty big dominant element of the overall site. We have, to scale, identified from other parks projects the size of elements that could, what they would be to at scale, that could be located on the park area itself, which we're, again, just simply identifying as a rectangular green box here. But for example, the large, on the right-hand side, the large green square that you see, that's a baseball diamond complex of 4 fields, with kind of a center walkways, kind of a more predominant way of laying out baseball fields these days. The gray box to the right of that is a kind of the size and acreage needed for a field house. We've kind of shown a natural area here in this big yellow. So I think, what I'd really like to do is kind of open this up for people just to say, now that you kind of see the size of these elements, see, the size of what a park space could potentially be, what of these elements, through all of the scale comparisons and photos and whatnot, and I know we've gotten some of that feedback, what of these elements would you like to see to begin to drop into our box here on the site? And so we've got everything from natural areas, sports courts, tennis courts, driving range, bike track, venture play, etc. So, thoughts? I know, and we should also say too is that, this comment earlier we were asking about active and passive uses, manicured in native landscape. Not all of the park needs to be filled up, so to say. I mean, I think this, as we showed you many examples, Ruby Hill, Lowry Park, Central Park, many days it's the right balance and the appropriate environmental thing to do in terms of water usage and reforestation, to have a balance of open active areas and, more passive native natural areas. So, but that's just what we've been seeing in park trends and some of the designs we've been doing. We really like to hear what you all think.
So let's go Pete, Mohammed, then David.
Thanks. Bill, could you tell me how many acres that large green box represents?
Yeah, that's approximately 80 acres in size. So, similar to some of the examples we showed you earlier.
Thank you. Quick follow-up. Is that the working size that is being contemplated?
I would say that it's in the range, again, going back to the city's classifications that we're looking at, we're somewhere between, if you look at their criteria, we're somewhere between a community park, which is, anywhere 50 to 80, and a regional park, which is 80. So we're kind of in that ballpark of park space. Yeah. I mean, and again, this all begins to be shaped and flush through as we look at, how do roads interact with the park edges? How does mobility begin to connect with the park? What are the appropriate depths for land uses around the park or on one side of the park? So, I mean, it's in the ballpark, but it's, does this shift? Does it get broken apart? Those are the next phases we'll work with you all on. But yeah, this gives you a good feel, I think, for similar parks within the Denver system, and these sizes to the right are those types of things that we think that could be programmed within it.
Mohammed?
Go
ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. To the earlier point, I would definitely say things that I think we don't, at least I personally don't want to see in here. We have a golf course that's less than a mile away. Rumor has it the US has more golf courses than McDonald's. So I don't know the truth there. But there's one literally right down the road. So I think, and not trying to get too much into the weeds, but the reason we are here to begin with is because the golf course went defunct and couldn't function well. So I don't think we need another golf course. The other question I have is, and I know you just put this, superimpose this image here. Would there be any connections made across Colorado Boulevard to the Clayton neighborhood through this? I saw one in the previous one, but would there be more than just 40th Avenue?
Mohammed, I can answer that. I mean, we'll definitely be looking at the mobility options here. I mean, there's definitely need for local movement, and also thinking through how that actually affects the park space. So we'll start addressing those challenges as we move forward. But right now, we're just really conceptualizing, thinking about the park space tonight. I do see, Dr. Ross, quite a few good suggestions in the chat as well. Yeah. So maybe Bill, as maybe Dr. Ross can ask David Martin and Sean Smith to ask their questions. You can start looking at the chat and start placing some of those suggestions.
Yeah.
Yep. Took the words right out of my mouth. David?
Thanks, Dr. Ross, and everyone else for giving me the moment to speak. I really don't have a comment about what has been presented this far. I think they're all great ideas, and we'll see how this progresses. A lot of positive things, so it's great to start out this way. But what I would like to comment on is, on a meeting such as this, where it's so heavily tilted toward textual commentary in the chat, we're doing a significant disservice to the 50 or so attendees in this meeting not being able to see those comments. So I hope that the city will make an adjustment to that, particularly in meetings where there is such textually heavy. It's unfortunate that they can't see what we're all talking about. They only see little blue and yellow and circles and squares going on a screen. It's unfair. So I made my comment.
Thanks. Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to say, related to the diagram in front of us, I think things like community gardens and fields, structured fields, baseball fields, should be closer to the neighborhood, and also consider what the parking is going to require. I'd hate to either have play fields far away from parking, or parking take up a lot of space. Central Park, it's all right off MLK, or people park along that. In Colorado, you're not going to have that. I think that'd be a huge safety issue. So it's either parking at the bottom, or you've got to just really think about where can people safely park and get themselves and their families into the park space.
Thank you. Imam?
Yes, I just think
You put yourself on mute there.
Yeah, I think that 80 acres is a bit much. I think we could scale that down in order to get the balance that we need for the other things that we're gonna be looking to put in that 155 acres. So maybe 60, 55, 65, but 80s I think is a bit much.
Cool. Thoughts on anything that you see that should go there in the space as it is, though?
Yeah, I think the baseball field and the basketball court would work well.
Thank you. All right. And then the things in the chat are being captured as well. Any other comments? Looking right here, make sure I don't miss a hand that's up. Okay.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this was helpful in kind of illustrating the potential for the types of elements that could occur on the site. And, you know, some good comments here in the chat about respecting the views to the west, buffering edges from adjacent roadways and being sensitive to that. So, you know, again, as we get into more detailed level of all of the components that shape the plan, we'll be taking that good feedback into consideration. And I'm still scanning through some of the comments here as well. Again, seems to be a thread of a notion for a balance of natural and recreational areas together.
Yeah. I want to go to Chandi really quick.
I had a question about, I see the outdoor swimming pool on here and splash pad. I know those come up a lot when parks are being designed and community is allowed, you know, gives feedback. And I was wondering at what point or what kind of threshold the city has with deciding whether or not community has an outdoor swimming pool, knowing that there are indoor swimming pools at, you know, like the rec center, but to my knowledge, there, you know, is an outdoor swimming pool really close by. And just wondering from the city standpoint, if there's at what point there's a threshold that can be reached of community comment or things like that to integrate that into the plan down the road.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chandi. And part of it actually, that is the kind of detail that we would hash out in a master plan conversation with the community. As you know, those are very expensive pieces of park infrastructure, right? An outdoor pool would probably cost about $15 million. So we would want to have those conversations about trade-offs with the community, like on a site-specific basis. There's lots of considerations that go with that, and you know, it's a conversation we'd want to have on that site with the community when we sort of design that detail. But absolutely, it's a big ticket item. Splash pads are smaller price tag, but they can still, in and of themselves, be a pretty large and complicated endeavor. I think they are appropriate for regional scale parks like this. So that would be a kind of thing where we'd certainly want to talk about it. There's a lot of considerations related to play functionality, but also living in a increasingly hot climate. Splash pads give us a little more service time period. Our outdoor pools are usually only open for 6 to 8 weeks during the summer. Splash pads, we can provide that kind of cooling and water play functionality for a longer period of time over the course, you know, like further into the early stages of summer and late stages of summer. So those are super important questions that we want to wrestle with the community, because some of the actual park design turns into a prioritization exercise.
Thank Bill. Do you guys have a final slide, or is that it? If it's so, I'm going to transition us.
Yeah, no, that was it. Thank you all for your comments and feedback in the chat. Really good comments. And again, I guess the last thing I would say is you can, hopefully again, just illustrate that we do have an overall big site and an opportunity to, I think, address, many of the needs that you're all expressing here. And I love the word that somebody mentioned earlier about balance. And, that's certainly how we'll continue to work all of the issues. But again, we really appreciate your time and feedback, and starting with the park as kind of the key feature of the overall planning process here. So thank you all for your excellent feedback tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. Great conversation. I want to make sure we have time for all of our our community members who signed up for public comment. And it looks like we have 10 and we got about 20 minutes. So I think we're right about where we need to be. And so Courtney, if you want to go ahead and open that up, the first person I have is Martha Douglas.
One second, Dr. Ross.
Okay.
I'm just making sure she's not calling in from one of the numbers.
Okay.
I do not see Martha on the attendees list. Can we move to
Karen?
Karen?
Yep, Karen Shoemaker.
Okay, I'm promoting Karen to a panelist right now.
Okay. Karen, are you on, Karen?
I see her. Oops. Karen is back.
Okay. All right, Karen, can you hear us?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we have you. And thank you for being here. You have 2 minutes.
You can, okay, you can hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Sorry, yeah, okay. I was trying to go in on the phone because I couldn't get on the computer. Yeah, thank you. That was a very interesting presentation. I appreciated everything that was presented. I am a physical therapist and a public health educator, and I've lived in the Park Hill area of Denver for 37 years. And it's always been disappointing to know that our city had such a low proportion of green space allotted to compared to other cities. And to have this current opportunity at the Park Hill Golf Club to develop more green space and park has been really exciting to me. But what's been disappointing is the anti-democratic process that the city has been using up to now. And I'd like to focus on that for just a little bit. Every American city is a mini democracy, or it should be. And Denver's approach to municipal issues should be embody basic democratic ideals, values, rights, responsibilities, and processes. And the underlying key to all of these responsibilities is really respect, RESPECT, as Aretha would remind us. And although the steering committee may have started out with the vision of sharing and respect in early 2020, 9 months or 11 months before the election, it has now seemed to have degenerated into an exercise of hypocrisy and disrespect. I mean, to have eliminated the SOS from the steering committee was a blatant example of not being open to feedback from all sides. And so I'd like to give a couple of other examples, and primarily I'm going to focus on West Side. West Side disrespected the city of Denver when it purchased the golf club with development in mind, knowing that the conservation easement was there. Then Mayor Hancock and the city disrespected the citizens of Denver by backing West Side's intention from day one, even up to day now. And by authorizing the city agencies to pursue what is seen now as a biased mixed development vision. And both West Side and the mayor's office have grossly disrespected the will of the citizens of Denver, which was made clear in the election.
I'm
last
sorry.
November that overwhelmingly
You reached your
opposed.
time, Karen. I'm so sorry.
I say one more statement. There's room for affordable housing and grocery stores on the west side of Colorado.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Stephen Epler.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Stephen. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Epler. I've been active in RNOs for many years. I'm the past president of CPFAN and a current delegate to INC. The opinions expressed are my own. I asked to speak tonight to express my objection to the overt collusion between the city and county of Denver and pro-development interests to limit the opposing points of view. In 2018, voters passed Measure 2A, approving a 0.25% sales tax increase, dedicating the expected $37 million to parks, specifically for land acquisition. This passed with 62% of the vote. Despite the existing 1998 perpetual conservation agreement easement, these earmarked funds, Park Hill Golf Course, the last undeveloped parcel of land in Denver, was sold to West Side and slated for development. Citizens banded together to get Ordinance 301 on the ballot. In response, developers promoted Ordinance 302. In November, 301 passed and 302 is defeated by a 2-to-1 margin. SOS Denver was central to this success at the ballot box. 2 months later, in January, SOS Denver was booted off the Park Hill Golf Course Steering Committee. The notifying letter stated that this occurred because the organization disagreed with the prevailing vision and visioning process, and participation as part of the committee would only result in further discord within the community and would not be valuable use of the committee's time. So much for diversity and inclusion. The actions by Denver officials and West Side are clear efforts to quell public opposition to the development plans for Park Hill Golf Course, even though this is counter to the public wishes as expressed at the ballot box. I'm speaking tonight to voice my objection to this approach to silencing those with dissenting opinions.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. Next up, we have Robert Greer.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good design elements going on here. I would just like to take this opportunity to push for as much native plants as possible. They kind of fulfill so many different roles. It's not just the pollution scrubbing, but it's also food access. If you plant sand cherries or service berries or other really lovely native shrubs, then we'll get those benefits as well. They're also great wildlife habitat. They don't need a lot of upkeep, sometimes virtually none. So I would really encourage any park design to include substantial native vegetation, especially trees, because they're so much better at cooling the environment. And I know that's obviously a really big concern. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Courtney Hysaw.
I'm promoting Courtney to panelist. There we
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Got 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. I grew up in Park Hill. I've lived here for the majority of my life, North Park Hill specifically. I think it kind of disheartens me that, with the decisions that are kind of surrounding the golf course are being made by people who I assume a small portion aren't from the North Park Hill area. You know, in terms of that Park Hill, in terms of the Park Hill golf course, being a golf course, I never benefited from that. I think from my perspective, I would love to see an athletic complex there. You know, athletics played a integral part of my development as a youth into my adult age at 42. Places like Skyland Recreation Center, you know, people who was from the community, who we trusted from the community, who actually made some solid changes in our lives that provided opportunity for us. So I would love to see a sports complex there. I would also love to see some employment opportunities for people in the neighborhood. You know, a park is cool, but you know, is it putting money in people's pocket? And that's about it.
Thank you, sir. Next up, I have Dane Washington.
Hello, everybody. So first and foremost, I think, just kind of following up after Courtney, I think there's two elements that I would just kind of like to discuss. I know as much as we keep having the conversation around recreation use and the use that exists currently in the neighborhood, I think we do get a different opinion from the young people that try to access those spaces. So I also feel like as much as the conversation we're having with these different, folks at the table that have a voice, again, I encourage you all to, try to get a little bit more engaged with getting some youth opinions, maybe setting up some focus groups with our young people to get their perspectives and opinions on how this space could benefit them at some point. And then the other piece that I kind of also, I keep hearing us talk about, baseball fields and soccer fields and those things, but just kind of keeping in mind, we do have 3 of the remaining historic Little League football teams in the community, being the Pirates, Falcons, and Prince Hall. And so as much as we are kind of really talking about some of that use, I wonder if we could really, be intentional about how we could, do athletic fields that will supplement these organizations, because all of these organizations have been around for 50 plus years in the community. And I know that there's a lot of young people that have benefited from their contributions. And so just really trying to be more intentional about getting some of that conversation piece from the folks that just don't necessarily have the opportunity to attend these meetings. I know it was brought to my attention this weekend, and I'm not sure if I'm accurate with the information as far as another meeting being held, but a lot of the folks that we get feedback from just really, talk about how they're not necessarily able to attend some of these meetings because they are actually out there with boots on the ground.
You've reached your time, Mr. Washington.
Okay, right on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kate Hakala.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 2 minutes, Kate.
All right. I thank you for the presentation. It was nice to see a catalog of parks, and I have to compliment your spin on this as a park driven thing, which is a joke. I've been a taxpayer since 1976, and I've lived in East Denver since 1962. I think the elephant in the room here is how big is the park? Well, you can't say, because it's how much the developer can minimally give you. So this whole thing to me is absolutely a moot point. Why are you spending taxpayers' money with this PowerPoint presentation on a planning process, and when you don't have the rights to do this? There's an easement in place. I'm an investor in this easement. It's a citywide thing. And the taxpayers have made it clear in the last election that the easement shouldn't be lifted. And the developer says, oh, we have a clear legal path. Well, what's the process? Where's the transparency? This is just all about backroom deals with the developer who pretended to work with the city and then scraped Loretta Heights, destroying 238 trees. It's an absolute joke, and I'm sorry that people are naive enough to think that they have a say in the process.
Thank you. Next up, I have Laura Lekman.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm trying to understand how the process is working right now, because I came into this meeting expecting to be able to be part of a public discussion. And since the chat is turned off for anyone who's not a panelist, I can't comment on anything that the gentleman presented. And that seems very counterproductive to me. Not being able to see what's being said by the panelists, not being able to comment about what I would like to see is my opinion counterproductive. I would like to see if it is possible to limit comments from now on to actual reaction to what is being said at the meeting, instead of continuing to bash the developer, continuing to call the city liars and connivers and whatnot. I would like to thank the city for removing the chair for SOS Denver. They did win their initiative, but they did so with inaccurate information to the supporters. I personally would like to see, for the design of the park, a specific theme. My personal choice would be something that is arts and performance related. I would like to see a design that is built around, instead of a kit of parts, where we take an oval and put it on a piece, and we take a square and put it on another piece. I'd like to see something that honors the history and heritage of Park Hill, and does so in a way that ignites and invites the populace to come in and be part of performances with an amphitheater, sculptural public art. And then I'd like to see all of that surrounded with housing, because there's plenty of room for both housing and a very, very large park. And the fact is that dark parks are dangerous at night. They are dangerous. And even Wash Park is dangerous at night.
I'm sorry, Laura, you reached your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Amy Harris. Looks like Amy's on. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's Amy Harris. I live in Northeast Park Hill, and I'm a 5th generation Coloradan, great lover of the outdoors and nature and everything that's involved in living in Colorado. I love it very much. And I've been participating in these meetings for a long time, ever since I moved to Northeast Park Hill, which was a dream of mine to actually own property in the city where I was born. It was a really great thing for me to finally get. And I was so excited to live across the street from the golf course, which I knew was protected by the conservation easement. And then all this started happening. So it's been a really interesting process to watch, because I too want affordable housing, and I want a grocery store that's closer by, even though, the grocery stores aren't too far, but it would be nice to have a closer grocery store, and definitely more convenient for some people who don't have their own cars, or, have mobility issues or whatever. But the fundamental issue that's been so frustrating for me during this whole process has been the contemplation of only the Park Hill Golf Course land as the solution to all of our neighborhood's problems, because that doesn't have to be the case. When the city engages in an area plan, we can look at more, and we really ought to look at more, because this neighborhood is surrounded by a lot. I mean, we've got Colorado Boulevard screaming, which I think that Sean was talking about, how you can't even hear yourself think there. And even when you walk on the paths that are near Colorado Boulevard on the golf course land, it's pretty stunning how much of an impact it has. We haven't talked about this, but I-70 right there, the Purina dog chow plant, the Suncor facility. I mean, we've got terrible air quality here. We're just completely surrounded by development and commercialism, and it's just, we can find opportunity in these other areas. And one of the things that's like, one of the biggest things that I thought of is, okay, affordable housing. Yes, let's think about affordable housing. How can we make sure that we have access to that? Oh, look at that. On 38th and
Amy,
Holly, we've got 1,000 people moving
you've
into
reached your
Northeast
time,
Park
Amy.
Hill. So I think that we can do more by zooming out. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last public comment citizen for the evening is Mark Marshall.
I do not see Mark Marshall in the attendees list.
Okay. Well, great. Well, that concludes our public comment section. We are right at 7:30, and I try to be respectful of your time and keep us honoring your time. And so we have reached our time for the evening. Our next meeting is March 9th. As always, you'll receive that correspondence via email. And then just a reminder to everyone that an actual public comment event is on March 24th. And so that'll be an event that is an actual public comment meeting where community is able to engage with and make comment on the things that they've seen, the presentations, consultants, all that good stuff. And it is separate from a steering committee work session. So please save the date for that and share that information out with those who might be interested. And with that being said, I just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for being here. And it looks like it is, I think it's March 8th. I'm so sorry about that. It'll be the Tuesday. Thank you for that, Lisa. And and the invites for the meetings will come from Courtney, Sean, and the 24th, you'll get an invite for that one as well. So with that being said, if there's anything else you need, as always, shoot an email. Otherwise, please have a great evening, and thank you for your time. And to the community, thank you guys for being here. We appreciate you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay. All righty.